Hey everybody, Eric Renier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this new episode of The Numbers. Philippe, it was the French language debate last night. You were not too far, so I'm wondering, did you hear the knockout punch from where you were just a few blocks away from the debate stage?
How about those Habs, man? How about those Habs in the playoffs?
Was there something else happening last night?
Yeah, absolutely. But no, seriously. I did watch the debate. I have to say, thing is, those debates are important. I think it went well, but the Habs were playing for the playoffs, man. So I roll my eyes at people who says, "Oh, we are such an unserious country for moving a debate because of a hockey game." Yeah, you want to have high ratings. You want to have people watching. So that did not bother me. But so okay, we'll talk about the debate. We'll talk about the latest numbers. We'll talk about our projections. I was asked this morning, I was on CBC this morning, and they asked me, so the poll tracker of the CBC is different from your projection. And I really, really try hard not to trash talk. But I said, no, Eric is good. He knows what he's doing. But, just...
Oh, well, that's nice. I'm glad you stood up for me. I mean, they're not so different.
They're not so different.
Anyway, we'll get into that later.
Okay, the debate last night.
Yeah,
Eric...
we should start with the debate because that's
Yes.
the most recent thing. And,
That's right.
If you listen to this podcast over, you take it in little bits and bites. Probably want to do the French one first because this is being recorded before the English language debate.
That's right.
So we don't really have anything to say about that just yet. But what were you going to say?
Okay. I would like to ask you first your impressions. The classic questions we have about debate is: was there a winner? Was there a loser? Was there a moment that stood out? I don't have strong opinions either way, and I hope you do, because otherwise this is going to be a boring conversation. But what did you make of the debate last night, Eric?
First off,
Yeah.
I always like to talk about the actual debate, like the format and everything. I really like the French language debates that have been moderated by Patrice Roy over the last little while. I think he does a terrific job. And I'm glad to see that, at least in terms of the planning, we'll see how it works out tonight, that the English language debate seems to be following the same format in terms of having one moderator and someone who is empowered and knowledgeable enough to interject into the debate. Yeah. So Patrice Roy did a terrific job, I thought, kept things moving. He challenged the leaders now and then, tried to make them answer the questions when they were going off topic. So overall, I thought the debate itself was good. I thought it was a useful debate in terms of people watching. We often grade them in terms of whether someone met their goals or we have this weird view where we talk about how we think others are going to react to the debate. I just thought that if you were a voter watching the debate, you heard all the leaders lay out their platform or,
Uncosted platforms, yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, we all know that the costed platforms end up being exactly what it ends up being in the budget. So really important that we have those fake numbers out there for everybody to talk about. Anyway. But anyway, I thought that in terms of like a debate, I thought it was a useful exercise. And I think that if you were a viewer who was really undecided or leaning or wanting to know, if you were looking at it, not us with our jaundiced strategist eye, but instead the eye of an actual voter, I think it was a good exercise. What did you think of the actual debate before we get into how everybody performed? And we'll grade them according to our jaundiced polling analyst eye.
Well, since the commission was created and has begun to run debates, of course there have been tons of problems, but most of those problems have been on the English side, I have to say, right? The French debates in 2019 and 2021 were far better than the English debates. And there are many reasons for that. I mean, Patrice Roy, moderator, is a huge part of it, obviously. I also think that it's much more difficult to be rude and cut somebody off in your second language because you're a bit less comfortable. I know Blanchet, the only francophone on the stage last night, did it a few times, and I thought he felt very comfortable. They're graded on a curve, right? It's not like Blanchet is not running to be prime minister. So at the same time, he was very comfortable, but he's not running for the top job. So it's not the same stress. It's not the same pressure. I think we should put to rest the notion that Mr. Carney's French is very poor. It's not great, but it's good enough. I mean, he was much better in this debate than he was in the leadership candidate debate. I was at those debates, and sometimes that French was painful to listen to. It wasn't last night. Monsieur Poilievre, I mean, this level of comfort was very high. I noticed in the body language and in the demeanor that while Mr. Carney and Blanchet and Singh to a lesser extent, like they looked at each other and they looked at the moderator when they spoke. Monsieur Poilievre straight at the camera all the time. Yeah. So it's trying to speak to people right at home, and he was the only one to do that extensively. I don't see any real, I didn't see any knockout punch. We're always looking for that, and it happens once every 40 years, right? I thought it was interesting, but at the same time, it's still bickering, and bickering in a debate like this is not part of a prime minister's job. So it's like we're asking them to be good in something that will not really help them during their job. That's what bothers me most about those debates. It's the theater, but it's important theater. And yes, Patrice Roy did hold them to account a few times, did press on the leaders when they were sidestepping the questions. So I'm looking forward to the English debate. I hope it's a good one, because obviously it's the only one that we'll have. But I have good confidence. Mr. Pakin knows what he's doing. He's done this before, right? So
yeah, he's done a lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my takeaway. And of course, when the game when the debate ended, I switched to the Habs game, and that was a little more compelling. But it's okay. It's part of it. So
yeah, I thought the French language debate is odd in the sense that we talk about often how well everybody spoke French, which we don't bother thinking about in the English language debate.
But it's important. That's the thing. It's important.
I know, and this is what I was going to say. Yeah. So, putting that out of the way, talking about the quality of the French, I kind of agree that Mark Carney, his French was better than I think I kind of expected it to be, especially earlier on in the campaign. Like, I thought he would really struggle. I thought that he didn't struggle. He was clearly understandable. Anybody who speaks French knew what he was saying when he, dropped a word or didn't quite finish his phrase. Like, there wasn't any time when you were like, I don't know what that meant. If you follow politics at all, you would have an idea of what he was saying throughout. So I thought that he actually did pretty well, and he didn't look like he was afraid. I've been sometimes afraid to speak French, but I didn't really see that there. So I think that when the bar has been set so low for his French, that he clearly passed it really easy. It was like this tiny little hurdle that went up to his knees, and he just stepped over it. If the hurdle had been higher, who knows if he would have stepped over it. But we've seen polling that suggested people didn't think he would win the debate or do that great. So the fact that he did fine is pretty much a huge victory for the Liberals. I think that they all had this day circled on the calendar as the moment that he was going to have the most trouble. And it wasn't really that much of a big deal. Like the debate to me seemed normal. Like I've watched lots of debates. I watched debates in provincial campaigns. This was a normal debate. There wasn't a moment where anybody did really badly. There wasn't a moment when anybody did really great. There wasn't that knockout punch, which never actually happens. There wasn't a moment when one of the leaders, to my view, was in this embarrassed position where they didn't know what to say or they tripped up. So to me, it does seem like it was a status quo debate.
I'll say this, though. Mark Carney got confused on the carbon tax, and I really do think it was a language thing. He kind of got confused. But thing is, the premise of the question he was asked and the Yves-François Blanchet pressing him on it, like somehow, like Quebec is at a disadvantage because Quebec is not getting the last bit of rebate from the carbon tax. It's like Quebec is not paying the carbon tax. Like, why would he get rebate? So for some reason, it came like, oh, the rest of Canada is going to get a rebate, is going to get a check in the mail. Like, yeah, that was the plan all along. So we don't get rebates because we don't pay the carbon tax in Quebec and in BC. Yeah. But so he seemed confused about this, but I was confused when I heard the question and the insistence of Monsieur Blanchet. Monsieur Blanchet was really good. It's just
He's a good debater.
He's a good debater.
He just is.
He was really good, and you know what? I think he's still going to be very good tonight because he's relaxed and he knows his stuff. It's just that's the thing. He was really good, but does it matter, right? Has Monsieur Blanchet, however good debate he had last night, was he able to insert himself and his party in the ballot box question? I do not know. And while I told you just before we started that, yeah, there's some discomfort on my end talking about the debate because we analyze numbers and we don't have numbers right now. And I'm really looking forward to see what numbers we'll have over the weekend, with the caveat that it's the long weekend, the long Easter weekend. So perhaps those polls will not be, I don't want to say all that good. Pollsters will don't want me to say this, but perhaps we'll have to wait until Monday or Tuesday before we see the effects, if any, of the debate. But yeah, that's my big takeaway. And
okay.
Go Habs.
All right,
Habs.
I won't press you anymore because we don't have any numbers yet.
No, but seriously, I thought I was asked a few times since yesterday, why was Singh so, I don't want to say aggressive, but he was really on the attack against Poilievre and not so much on Mr. Carney. One would think that Singh would have to draw back those voters that he lost to the Liberals and to some extent to the Conservatives as well. And for me, the answer is in the numbers. The answer is in the numbers because Mr. Carney has really good numbers among NDP voters. What's left of the NDP voters? Whereas what's left of the NDP voters really dislike Poilievre. He's not going to attack somebody who is, I don't want to, beloved is too strong, but somebody who is reasonably appreciated by his base. So I, those wondering why Jagmeet Singh was so aggressive on Pierre Poilievre is because he's the opponent. He's the main opponent of the NDP in this election. And the NDP, if they want to win back some of those rural ridings, guess what? It's not Liberal votes; it's Conservative votes that have to come back to the NDP.
Well, and it's always the case that we've seen it before that people who vote for the Liberals and the NDP don't really like when those two parties go after each other because their supporters generally view the Conservatives as the bigger problem, right? So I agree that if Singh goes hard after Carney, I don't think that pulls Liberal voters over to the NDP because I think that you would have some of those voters be like, yeah, okay, fine, but we really don't want Poilievre to win, and so we'll have to stick with Carney. That's why I think you always heard from Singh, even when it was in the other debates with Justin Trudeau, that it was more of disappointment. Disappointed that Trudeau hasn't lived up to his progressive promises. Not a fierce attack against him. And I think you heard elements of that as well with Carney. Like, I mean, at one point I think Singh was talking about, I can't recall what the issue was, but when he was talking about Carney's position, he said malheureusement, unfortunately. It was more of that kind of soft thing that you're not living up to those standards. So I do think that it'll be interesting to see tonight whether Singh goes after Poilievre again, because I agree with you that he, in a way, he needs to not communicate to the Liberal voters that the Liberals are the worst option, but that the NDP is a good option to stand up against the Conservatives. It's a very delicate, weird little balance that is hard for them to play. And I think we also kind of saw that in the interactions between Blanchette and Poilievre, because most of the Conservative ridings in Quebec where they're on the bubble are Bloc Conservative battles.
That's right.
But Poilievre doesn't want the Bloc numbers to go down any further, because if the Conservatives pick up a few more points and manage to get to 25% in the Montreal suburbs, but the Bloc drops down to also to 25%, then the Liberals win all those seats. The Conservatives don't really have much room to grow. So that was also, I think, why I can't really even recall, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't even recall that much of a criticism from Poilievre against Blanchette and the Bloc.
I was asked also, can you imagine this debate, but in the fall, with Justin Trudeau? Would have been completely different. Like, all the attention would have been on Poilievre and not on Carney, right? Not on Trudeau. Well, yeah, not on Trudeau, because we have seen that it's not a threat. And Blanchet, I remember speaking with people from the Bloc saying, that was 3 months ago, so before the realignment in voting intentions. Like, the Bloc had the Conservatives in their crosshairs. Like, they figured Poilievre has poor numbers in Quebec, and so attacking him can help us. But as you said, right now the the Bloc's lunch is being eaten by the Liberals and not the Conservatives in Quebec, and so yeah, delicate balance. But looking forward to tonight. But I kind of also expect to be irritated and disappointed. I don't like bickering. I don't like people.
Well, I
fighting.
don't actually enjoy debates.
I just want them to get along, right?
I know. Why can't they all just be nice?
Yeah, I know, but that's part of the game.
But, you know, we'll see what happens tonight, and people are watching or listening to this, and might have already happened by then. But my view of what's going to happen tonight has been even more tempered by what happened last night.
Really?
I kind of feel like we got a bit of a preview of what the English language debate will be. I think Poilievre will be a little bit more aggressive, and Carney will obviously be a lot more verbose. But I don't know. I'm gonna shoot myself afterwards. Shoot myself in the foot, I guess, by saying this. But I'm not expecting much tonight. But we'll see. We'll see. You never know. All right. If you're listening to this the next day and something huge has happened, then just disregard this comment. Okay.
Want to talk about the latest numbers?
Yeah. So is it getting closer?
A little bit. Okay. It is getting a little closer.
Yeah.
It's getting okay. So the narrative around the fact that this race is getting closer is not false, but it's been exaggerated. So instead of saying Liberal +10 or Liberals +8, although we did see a +8 yesterday from Nanos, we are seeing more +5 and +6s and +4s. We had Abacus yesterday showing 40% for the Liberals, 38% for the Conservatives, so only 2-point lead, which is a statistical tie. We had Léger, 43% for the Liberals, 38% for the Conservatives. That was released on Wednesday. But when I say it's been exaggerated, is that the Conservative comeback, which is very modest, maybe a point or two, is not in the right places, or it's not enough in the right places, right? We still see, I have a 9-point lead on average for the Liberals in Ontario.
Yep.
They can recover a bit in BC. They can do better than we think in Alberta, where maybe it's not 8 Liberal seats, maybe it will be 4. Sorry, but it doesn't matter if Ontario doesn't move. They have to move the numbers in Ontario. And I don't know about your numbers, Eric. I didn't see much change in Ontario right now.
No, I still got, as you said, the 9-point lead. It's not 10 or 11, I guess, which is what it was before. But that still gives, for me, more than 80 seats for the Liberals. Yeah. I do have that things, as you said, getting better for the Conservatives in Alberta, tighter race in British Columbia, bigger numbers for the Conservatives in the prairies, but not really that much movement in Atlantic Canada. And as you said, nothing really going on in Ontario. And Ontario is the whole ballgame, right? Because if the Liberals are still doing really well in Quebec and the Conservatives aren't closing that gap in Ontario, I mean, right there, it's 130 seats. Yeah. You put those two together. And if the Liberals are at 130 seats out of those two provinces, they're virtually assured of already getting a minority. Once you add the extra 20 or 25 to Atlantic Canada, they're well over the threshold you would need for a minority government. So, yeah, we're not really seeing that movement. And it is, as always,
it is the time
afternoon.
Hello, Marsouille.
Yeah, but this time the door's closed. She's not going to come on in. But a lot of the movement we've also seen in the polls is more in comparison to previous surveys, right? A lot of the movement that we've seen that has tightened the margin is because the Angus Reid Institute that had an 8-point lead before now has 6. That Ipsos that had a 12-point lead then had was it 6 or 8?
Was it 6
right?
also? Yeah.
So it's more that those polls that were on the bigger lead side are coming more to the area where the other polls are. And then we had Abacus that had previously had a 4-point lead going to a 2-point lead. So it does seem like there's a tightening, but it's somewhat exaggerated a little bit by some of the polls that were out in the field earlier that had bigger leads, because the trackers are not really showing that great of a movement. They are still showing that 4, 6, 7-point lead for the Liberals. So it's you can get a little bit, like, our averages are somewhat influenced by who is publishing. right?
Yeah,
The
of
fact
course.
that Abacus came out yesterday and had a 2-point lead pushes the average down more than it would if it had been another Angus Reid poll with a 6-point lead. Like, it's just kind of how it works.
I mean, we should mention the narrative poll that we had of Atlantic Canada.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, it was spectacular. This Atlantic Canada is more liberal than Alberta is conservative. In that
Saskatchewan even.
right? And Saskatchewan even. So in narrative has a big sample size only of Atlantic Canada, and it was 65% liberal against 26 conservative. That is a lot. And now I don't have the report. I thought I did, but basically the Liberals were leading by huge margins in every province. Of course, PEI was smaller, but it was in all 4 provinces. And I looked at those numbers like, well, this is very close to a sweep, wasn't it?
Yeah, if they get over 60, I think. Because in all 4 provinces, the Liberals are over 60 and the Conservatives are under 30.
Yeah.
There could be a few holdouts, I suppose, if that was the reality. But it could end up being a sweep if it was that big. The NDP was nowhere. Its best result was 12% Newfoundland and Labrador.
Yeah.
Which is still worse than what they had last time, and they didn't win a seat.
Yeah.
So the thing is, though, the average is not 65-25.
No.
It's 55-35.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So maybe this is on the higher side. Maybe the other polls aren't as right. But my takeaway from that poll wasn't necessarily that the Liberals were up so much. It was that there wasn't really a province that was standing out.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
That we're not seeing a province where Conservative support in Atlantic Canada is far higher than the other ones. Right. So every time we've seen these breakouts for Atlantic Canada, all they really show is that all 4 of those provinces are swinging more or less the same way.
Yeah.
Which is good for our projections because we make the same kind of assumptions.
But also, I mean, most federal polls have like 100 cases for the 4 provinces, and now we had was it 1,200? I think it was. So it gives you again, maybe it's a tad high for the Liberals in that poll, but as you said, the important was the breakouts. And right now, here's the thing, and I repeat this to my conservative friends: to win, the Conservatives have to hold what they had in the last election and find 45 seats, 45 new seats. Now, if you start in Atlantic Canada and you cannot defend the 8 seats that you have, that means maybe you have to find 50 new seats. And then you get it to Quebec, and the gains that you maybe were projected to have, 3-4 gains, don't happen because the Liberals are, so far in front. And then you have to find 50 seats in Ontario. Maybe you win 6 or 7 more in BC. It's okay. So, I mean, you need 40 in Ontario. So the math is just that since when we say Ontario matters so much, it's because the numbers have swung everywhere else in favor of the Liberals. It's, I don't want to make this all about Ontario, but when we look at the breakouts, you draw a path to a Conservative victory. Without Ontario, there's no path. Basically, there's no path. So
no, there's no path. So that is really the focus. And in the English language debate, obviously Ontario is the key province there because there's not as much movement. There's just simply not as much movement possible in the other areas, right? Because in British Columbia, the NDP vote is so far down, and there's not that many seats that the Conservatives can gain there. The Conservatives also already did really well in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba in the last election, so there's not much more to gain there. It is all in Ontario and Atlantic Canada, and at least Atlantic Canada seems pretty out of reach. And I think that is easier to say than Ontario because Atlantic Canada, first of all, the gap is huge. But secondly, Carney is very much in the mold of a Liberal that would appeal to Atlantic Canadians, right?
A progressive Conservative, right?
Yeah, and so it seems even more unlikely that the Conservatives could make up that gap in Atlantic Canada. So then it all comes again down to Ontario and primarily the GTA, where we've seen numbers out of the GTA, and they're usually not any different than what we'd expect based on the province-wide numbers in Ontario. So that's kind of it.
Eric, let's talk about our projections.
Okay, so what is this glaring difference between the two of us that needed to be exposed on national television this morning?
Okay, so this morning, my update, the website is now updated. Liberals, 191. What do you have?
I have 196.
Controversy. Conservatives, 123.
I have 121.
121? Okay, that's fine. I have 20 for the Bloc.
Me too.
Because the Bloc has polled better, right? We don't see the 20 and 21s. We saw some 25s and even a 27 from Synopsis. It's still not 33 like they had last time. So it's a bit better. 8 for the NDP. You still have the NDP low, right? You still have 5.
I'm still at 5.
And 1 for the Greens.
Yeah.
Quebec. I have in Quebec 45.
How did she open the door this time? I closed it.
Is she right there? Well, I mean, you're just a tenant.
The internet wants to see. Here's Mercury.
Oh,
there you go.
Hello, Mercury. Oh my God, I love Mercury. Beautiful. Anyway, Mercury majority for Mercury.
I don't know how she figured out the doorknob or something. I'm not sure how this is happening.
Where were we?
5 for the NDP. You have 8.
I have 8. So I have 1 in Quebec, Rosemont-Petite-Patrie. I have 3 in Ontario. We've discussed them before. Windsor West, Hamilton Centre, and London Fanshawe. I have 2 in Manitoba. I have Winnipeg Centre and Elmwood Transcona. I have 1 in Alberta, Edmonton Strathcona. And I still have 1 in BC, although the bracket of possible seats in BC has widened for the NDP. They also have been polling a little better in British Columbia. Probably not enough, but they're polling better. I don't think we see the single digits anymore. We see like teens. Not sure if it's enough to save many of those seats, though. So that's what I have.
The biggest difference between us does seem to be Manitoba. I still have them at 0. Which I'm not sure if even I kind of buy. I have them at 0 to 3. Yeah. But the numbers I have just still don't put them in a position to win those seats in Manitoba.
So in Manitoba, you have 8 Liberal and 6 Conservative?
I guess so, yeah.
I have 6, 6, and 2. Okay.
So that seems to be one of the bigger differences. Maybe we'd get some more polling out of Manitoba that would help clear things up.
That would help.
Because I'm still thinking about that Probe Research poll at the beginning of the campaign that had the NDP at 9% in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
You don't win a seat at 9%.
No,
so
you
it's
don't.
just, we'll see if we get some new numbers out of that. So there's not any huge controversy between us. We got a 5-seat difference at the Liberals. Bump the Conservatives up a couple, bump the NDP up a couple. Doesn't make a difference. But what are your odds right now for winning that majority?
Okay, odds. 80% Liberal majority. 18% Liberal plurality, 2% Conservative plurality, and a fraction of a percent of a tie. What about you?
So you're telling the Conservatives there's a chance.
There's a chance. There is a chance. It's
Oddly
just
enough,
that... Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, yeah, go ahead. What were you going to say?
It's just that there's a chance when you look at, again, the projections that we tell you. When I say 191 for the Liberals, this is for media consumption, people. It's a bell curve. It's so important to tell that, and I keep telling my students about this. The uncertainty. I mean, I could present the Liberals as a bell curve, and I would get no clicks and no views. So I think it's important to show both, to show the number that we have, plus the bell curves, and try then to insist that, my Liberal vote right now, vote projection, is 43% plus or minus 5. So you would say plus or minus 5, okay, again a bell curve, so that means that the Liberals could be at 38 or 48. Two things. First, the extremes of the bell curves are less likely than the middle values. But also, yes, it's possible that pollsters are a bit wrong. In my model, I include some scenarios where pollsters underestimate or overestimate a little bit, not by 10 points, the polls. And so, that's why the bell curve is wide. And the bell curves right now, they touch the Conservatives and the Liberals. They do touch. So if the Conservatives really have a better get-out-the-vote campaign and they're underestimated in the polls and they do better in key areas, they could win still like 155 seats and they would have a plurality. I'm not sure they would have I mean, it would be hell to govern such a plurality, but that's a story for after the election. What about you, Eric? What's your odds right now?
For the majority, it's the same. I have just over 80%. And but for the minority, it's 13%. So I have a 6% chance for the Conservatives to win the most seats. So it's 3 times as big as yours, but it's still it's more or less the odds that a poll is supposed to be outside the margin of error, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's almost all minority. There's like the majority scenario is the disaster. 10 point, like you take the 2013 BC election and have it applied to the entire country. That's more or less what the model is suggesting. So, okay. But, it's interesting because it's down to 81%, because I think at one point, both of us had that odds of majority in the high 90s for the Liberals.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
That at least is no longer as much of a certainty, but an 81% chance is still a pretty high certainty. At least if it was held today. I mean,
yeah,
we'll
absolutely.
see what things are. This is going to keep moving around.
Absolutely. For those who follow me on social media, you saw that I did a butterfly chart. So I ranked all the ridings for the Liberals and Conservatives from most likely to least likely, and you can see the path to a majority. So right now, you can see, I mean, it's not as clear-cut as in the States, where you talked about the tipping point, right? The tipping point state. But right now, in my ranking for the Liberals, the 172nd seat is Burnaby Central. So,
really,
if you think the Liberals win Burnaby Central, which I think somebody important is in that riding, then my model says, well, then it's a Liberal majority. And if I flip it to the Conservatives, the 172nd seat for the Conservatives is Winnipeg West, which kind of so what is more likely, the Liberals winning Burnaby Central or the Conservatives winning Winnipeg West?
Well, I mean, right now
it's the Liberals.
Central. Yeah.
But so anyway,
what are the other seats around your 172 for the Liberals? Because I also did this exercise today, and I'm wondering if we have any of them that are the same. Give me like 2 or 3 on either side.
Okay, on either side. So Edmonton Southeast for the Liberals, La Prairie à Tatequen, South Shore of Montreal, and Central Newfoundland, which was won by the Conservatives last time. On the other side, Cloverdale, Langley City, which kind of is a weird one because, of course, of the by-election, the weird by-election, and Richmond East, Stevenson, and Niagara South. So this is
Niagara South.
Yeah,
that was one of mine too.
Yeah.
So that is the tipping point seat. The Numbers podcast has come to a consensus. If the Liberals win Niagara South, they will win a majority government. There you go. I'm glad we got... You know what was my fun one that was in my list? Peterborough.
That is a very strange one. Bellwether
seat. Yeah.
That's right. Huh.
Okay, well, how about we finish this up with the riding of the day?
Yep.
I'm going to go first with a simple one. So the 2 debates have been taking place at the Maison Radio-Canada, which is located in Laurier-Sainte-Marie, is the riding in downtown Montreal. What's interesting is that this was going to be a really interesting seat a few months ago. Yeah. Stephen Guilbeault, who was the environment minister, and now he's a different minister, heritage, he seemed to be in trouble. The NDP, it seemed like maybe the kind of seat that they would be pretty high on the list for winning if they started making some gains. You were talking about if the debate had been taking place in the fall, that French language debate for Jagmeet Singh would have been pretty high stakes because they would have had chances to pick up some seats in Montreal. Maybe even the Bloc could have done pretty well in Laurier-Sainte-Marie, but with the numbers that we see now in the province, does not seem likely that this is on the bubble, that the Liberals hold it, seems pretty clear. And we saw some numbers that came from Synopsis Recherche, and they had some numbers for the island of Montreal. The Liberal numbers weren't as high as I would have expected, but the NDP numbers were down from where they were in the last election. So that just means the hill to climb to win a seat like Laurier-Sainte-Marie is even tougher. So that was my riding of the day, just because that's where all the leaders are today, and that's where they all were yesterday.
Yeah, and will be tonight. And in our conversation, Eric, you and I remember speaking to you about maybe 4 or 5 seats for the NDP in Montreal, right? pretty sure that was an over-under also that we did in Christmas, but we won't talk about that ever again. My writing of the day, I'm choosing a one that puzzles me a little bit. Calgary Center. Calgary Center, if you take the redistributed data, was won by the Conservatives by 20 points. And right now I have a statistical tie between the Liberals and the Conservatives. The NDP had 16% in that riding in 21. And so if the numbers hold true, if if at least half of that NDP vote melts into the Liberals, and the Liberals are in the low 30s, high 20s in Alberta, and the Conservatives are doing okay in Alberta, but maybe lower than recent historical levels, yeah, this could be one to watch. I still think the Conservatives have an advantage because it's Calgary, but this one could be close. So Calgary Center is my writing of the day. Greg McLean, the incumbent for the Conservatives, and Lindsay Luno of the Liberals is the challenger. So we'll see.
I'm really curious if you could only tell me with the results of one set of ridings in the next election, I would probably ask for Calgary and Edmonton. I'm just very curious what's going to happen there.
Me too.
So we'll see on election night. All right. Well, Philippe, we're going to have to watch the debates again tonight, and then then we'll be done with that for a while. So we'll talk about those debates, and we'll probably start to have some numbers out of Quebec as well by the time we next chat on Saturday. And Saturday is our Patreon members episode. Right. So if you're not already a member, you can go to thenumberspod.ca to get that episode on Saturday, and we'll break down what we saw in the leaders' debate and any new numbers that we have, some post-debate numbers that will be published by then. So Philippe, until then, have a good end of the week, and we'll chat on the weekend.
Absolutely. Merci beaucoup, Eric. And on that end, just for the Elections Canada people, if the Habs play in the playoffs on election night, please move the election. All right? All right. Have a good night. Thank you, Ben.
I heard her meow.
Let's start it. Oh, t'es pas content, tu peux partir. Ah! There you go. And she's gone.